and salutations from the southern tropics of Michigan. I'm Jordan the IT guy, and today let's chat about that wonderful thing everybody knows and loves, Git. That's right, beautiful, glorious, wonderful source control, the thing that helps you roll back changes when you accidentally go oops and wrote the code. We'll be using this as we go forward along in the series, and I'll be making the Git repository publicly available. Now, before we jump into it, in the event that this happens to be particularly of interest to you, there is going to be a conference going on in May called MMSMOA. It's a big old gathering of nerds where we all get together and we talk about some wonderful things, including but not limited to endpoint management. That's the Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager platform tools, Intune, as well as PowerShell and all the wonderful ways that it can make our lives better as systems administrators. I happen to be planning to be there. I will also be joined by a fellow MVP in the Microsoft space to be talking about Git and how to get started with VS Code and Git and everything like that, working all the way into Azure Functions. But enough about that. Let's go ahead and jump onto this. If you're interested in this content and you are planning on being an MMSMOA, come up, say hi, find me, maybe come check out the session. I'll throw a link to it down below at the end of the video. All right, let's get started with Git. All right, the very first thing that we need to do when working with Git is we need to go ahead and download the application. If you don't have it downloaded or don't know where it is, let's go ahead and open up our web browser here. I'm going to go ahead and head on over to GIT SCM. If you just type in Git space SCCM and Google it, you'll find it. Go ahead and click that right there. You'll see this download for Windows button. We'll click it here. We can click download button here. Now, I already happen to have it downloaded, so I'm not going to make you watch me sit there and watch progress bar download. So I'm going to go over here, downloads, and right click, go ahead and run as administrator. We'll say yes. We're going to go ahead and hey, next. We're going to go ahead and check daily for Windows updates, for updates to Git, because, you know, why not? Let's stay up to date. Next. That's fine. Now, let's take a pause here. This is an important one. We want to choose the right editor, okay? Now, the right editor would be the one that we just spent the last two, episodes setting up and getting configured for us. So we're going to go ahead and hit this drop down. If you're using Insiders, make sure you choose Insiders. If you're not, just choose to use Visual Studio Code. I'm going to choose using Insiders here. Go next. I'm going to go ahead and say override the default. We're going to say choose main. We'll go next. I'm fine with it using default. We'll use bundled OpenSSH. Go next. Use the OpenSSL library. Check it out. Use Windows. Default is fine. Credential Manager is fine. Enable system caching is fine. Again, and install. Do that, get a drink of a milkshake, and come back in a few minutes. And what do you know? Just like that, we're done. Let's go ahead and continue on with this. So we'll just go ahead and hit finish here. We can hit OK. We can read our release notes, but overall, it doesn't really matter. The important thing to keep in mind here is that Git is what runs behind the scenes to make stuff like GitHub and various other source control platforms work. Okay, let's go ahead and get a repository all set up and ready to rock and roll. I'll go ahead and click this Git back to our browser. I'm going to navigate out to the internet, and if I go ahead and type in something along the lines of GitHub and hit enter, we can actually find GitHub. Now, if I go out here to my profile, we can actually see a list of all the different repositories that are out here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and choose repositories and the Let's Chat PowerShell repository. I've already created this repository. Creating one's pretty simple. If you do want to create one, you just click new repository, and there's a couple of steps that you do to create one. But for the purposes of this, I just want to sync this into VS Code using Git. To do that, I'm going to click this code drop-down button here and grab this HTTPS URL code and hit copy. I'd minimize this. We're going to open up VS Code. We can give this a second here to open up. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to see this clone repository button that shows up over here. That's this option right here. I'm going to go ahead and click clone repository right there. That's going to now let me clone from GitHub. So if I just come up here and hit paste, I can actually then clone from this URL. However, maybe I don't want to use this URL to do it, because instead I'd rather just log into GitHub and have access to all of my repositories. Fine. If I hit extensions over here and if I type in Git, we'll find this GitHub pull request and issues item. Now, I am going to pick the official one that's been released by GitHub. I'm just going to go ahead and hit install pre-release. Now, if I go ahead, I'm going to just go ahead and close and reopen here just to help it out. If I go ahead and choose clone repository this time, I can go ahead and click clone from GitHub. The extension GitHub wants to sign in using GitHub. We'll hit allow. It's going to prompt me back to a website, use my existing login session to open that token. And what's going to happen now is it's going to list all of my different repositories that I have that are available out here. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and choose this one. I'm going to go ahead and navigate to my documents directory. I'm going to create a new folder. It's going to be called repos. Now this is important. It is not going to use the folder repos directly to create the content. It's going to create a folder named after the repository in the folder called repos. Now, a side note for this, you don't want to put this in something like OneDrive. You can, but I really don't recommend it. You'll get lots of little tiny diff file changes, and it's kind of annoying, and it can get all kinds of weird really easily. It's much better to just pick a location locally in your source. Since I'm not really using this VM and I'm not using known folder redirection or KFM or anything like that, just doing something like this is perfectly fine. I'm just going to say repos, click folder, and it's now going to go ahead and clone that content. Now, if I just go down here and click on open, it's going to go ahead and open that content for me. It's going to open that folder in the workspace. Now, in order to actually be able to develop anything and run the code inside of it, we need to trust the code. VSCode does this as a security precaution. It doesn't just default assume that code is allowed on the inside of it. Okay? So to that end, I'm going to go ahead and say trust the authors because I'm the author of the content. And in fact, yes, I do trust them. So I should enable all features, including debugging. So once that happens, I'm going to go ahead and choose this example PS1. We can see I have a file over here that says write host hello world. But now I want to make a change to it. I want to make a change to it that says something like hello audience. We'll go ahead and save that. Now, once that got saved, you'll notice that I have a little 1 show up over here. This little 1 over here indicates, hey, there's changes that we're ready to commit and send out to Git. Okay? Well, if I go ahead and click on this, and if I type in send audience commit, and we'll get rid of this one. And we'll go ahead and hit stage. And we'll go ahead and try and commit it. Now, once we hit save all and commit here, it's going to yell at us. It says, make sure you configure. Now, this is a key difference if you set this up using Git and not something like GitHub. If you use the GitHub application, you won't get this error message. Because I set this up using Git, I'm getting this specific little like nagging nuisance message here. And so what I actually need to do is if I just go ahead and cancel on this, I'm actually going to type in git config space dash dash global, and what this does is it's going to set a global config change. Inside of it, I'm going to set my username to be Jordan the IT guy. Make that a capital T, and hit enter, and then I'm going to do user.email to be jordan.benzing@gmail.com. Yes, that's my email address. You can all send me spam, I guess, if you really want to, and hit enter on that. That's now going to configure who I am that's sending the commit. And now, if I go ahead and click this button here, again, it now will allow me to commit because it now has a record of who made the commit associated to the commit record. And if I hit sync changes and say OK, it's now going to send this commit and send this change up. I'm going to go ahead and say sign with browser again because I'm already logged in there, and so it'll be happy to let me log in that way and make sure that I'm allowed to. And I'll say, sure, go ahead and run a git fetch up periodically. If I now go back up here and I go to this Let's Chat PowerShell window, if I go ahead and I go to this Let's Chat, we can see that it has in fact been updated from where it used to say hello world to where it now says hello audience. All right, that's all we're going to do for managing Git today. This is how we're going to be committing things going forward. In fact, we'll be creating folders. I'll go ahead and include a link to this repository down below, as well as a link to that MMS information as well for you in the future. I hope this is helpful and informative, and if you are coming to MMS, I look forward to seeing you there. Till next time.